Well, back to our interview with the Alberta Premier Danielle Smith this week. On Thursday, we played the first part of our discussion on the $8 million social media campaign that Smith launched to push back on Ottawa's proposed net zero electricity grid by 2035. Well, in the second part of our discussion, Premier Smith and I discussed her thoughts on pulling her province out of the Canada Pension Plan to create one that's purely Alberta's. I do also want to talk to you today about the CPP because if things go to plan, there will be a referendum in 2025 on Alberta possibly pulling out of the Canada Pension Plan. How do you see that as being advantageous for people in your province?
I think people needed to understand just how much we end up overpaying on every single federal program. This has been a conversation in our province since 2001, when Stephen Harper and other academics wrote what was called the firewall letter about why can't we assert the same jurisdiction that Quebec does, have our own police force, our own revenue agency, our own pension plan, our own immigration system. Those are the kind of things that were in a discussion called the Fair Deal Panel a number of years ago. And one of the things that came out of it was doing the examination of how an Alberta pension plan would benefit Alberta pensioners. As we found out, Morneau-Chappelle did the initial report. They since got released by Lifemark and then TELUS. I mean, there's 3 different companies involved in it, but they all came to the same conclusion. Using the formula in the Act, Alberta ratepayers would be entitled to 53% of the assets, which would reduce premiums, increase benefits, and also create an ecosystem for a really interesting build out of our financial community here. And so those are the things that we're going to be consulting on.
Okay, let me ask. Sorry to interrupt though, but you know the numbers that you're using, they're not agreed upon numbers, as you know, because you say Alberta would be entitled to half of the CPP fund's assets, but the CPP's investment board says really you're looking at a 16% entitlement. Would that still leave Albertans richer, better off if an Alberta fund had fewer assets than expected?
Well, I guess we'll have to go to the court to decide if the legislation means what the legislation means. I mean, we wanted to use somebody who is experienced in doing actuarial analysis and read the legislation, and that's the number that they came up with. And so that's the number that we're consulting on. If it ends up in court where we try to have to figure that out, then that's what we will do. But I would say that there have been multiple times that we've gone through over the years where that pension formula could have been adjusted, most recently 2019. So we have to go based on what the legislation and the statute says. And that's the calculation we ended up with. That's the measure of how much Albertans overcontribute. We overcontribute on premiums because we have a higher workforce participation rate, a larger number of workers working at the highest levels and contributing the max, as well as a younger population. And as a result, we end up overpaying on this program and every other one. So there is a mechanism for us to be able to have a referendum to see if Albertans want to create their own plan. And if that's what they tell us that they want to do, then we'll put it to a referendum.
Okay, you point to some of the current demographics, including having such a young population in Alberta. But what if those demographics switch? What if that doesn't hold longer than a couple of generations? Where does that leave maybe not Alberta's children right now, but the province's grandchildren and those who follow? What type of economic security can you guarantee or talk about if you don't have a larger pension fund like the CPP?
Well, I guess I'm not defeatist. I think Alberta is on its way to double its population. We have an exciting culture here. We've got entrepreneurial spirit here. We have the highest number of people coming to this province in our history. And I expect that if we have good government policy, that's going to continue. That's the culture of Alberta. And so I'm not going to be defeatist about it. And I think that we have the expertise to be able to manage our own affairs just as well as Quebec does. And that's why I'm persuaded by the report. But it's not up to me. It's going to be up to Albertans. And they'll be the ones who give us the feedback in the review panel that we're doing.
Okay, a review panel that would then possibly lead to a 2025 referendum. But in your mind right now, Premier, I'm wondering, what would the wording of that referendum be? Would it be to further explore and then hold a subsequent referendum down the road, or are you talking about an immediate mandate to pull out of CPP altogether?
I mean, if it comes down to it, and with the panel discussion, I mean, they're reporting back to us in May. They're in the process of doing their consultation. And we'll have a pretty clear idea of whether Albertans want to have a referendum on this. And the referendum will be, do you want to give notice to the CPP investment board that you want to establish your own Alberta pension plan? Yes or no? It would be very straightforward. At this moment, I don't know. I don't have a good gauge on whether Albertans even want to have that vote. But that would be it would be up to them. Albertans would make that choice in a referendum if that's what they tell us they want to do.
Premier Danielle Smith, always appreciate the time. Thank you for this.
You bet. Talk to you again.